I'm Gertjan from the Desmet research group of the KU Leuven. And indeed, I'm going to present Shiny Shell's rustic course. Maybe first, let us make a clear distinction between standalone browsers and embedded or integrated browsers. I think we're all familiar with the former. I'm talking about Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and the likes, installed on our desktops, laptops, smartphones. In contrast, integrated or embedded browsers we find mostly on more specific purpose consumer products, like smart TVs, smart watches, gaming consoles, and nowadays even cars. So here, the vendor decides to ship a browser in these products. Often this is the open source Chromium browser. Sometimes they tweak it a little bit, put their own logo on it, and call it, for example, a Samsung Internet browser. These come all pre-installed, and sometimes the user even doesn't have the choice of using a different browser. So what do we know already about this? First of all, we know for a fact that standalone browsers are complex and vulnerable, right? This is proven by thousands of bug reports filed in the past decade, but also a large body of security research. We've come to terms with this because the vendors of standalone browsers take security very seriously, right? They have dedicated security teams, bug reporting platforms, automated updates, and also the version is very transparent to the user. This we cannot really say about embedded browsers. We know that some of them are vulnerable due to prior isolated studies, but that's about it. I wish I could say that this was also okay, but actually they don't reach the same standard of security as we see with the vendors of standalone browsers. So this domain is underexplored, and that's why we wanted to investigate the question, how secure are integrated browsers actually? For this, we started a crowdsourcing study. So in essence, participants could enroll their own products using the study, and this would subject the embedded browsers to an automated security evaluation. We chose crowdsourcing because there's a vast diversity of consumer products, often with closed source firmware, and there's also no comprehensive overview of all products that actually embed a browser. Also, we wanted to gain real-world insights about these embedded browsers. For example, if all these browsers in the wild are actually updated timely. So to that end, we developed an automated crowdsourcing framework called CheckEngine. It's open source, so feel free to visit our GitHub repository. So in essence, it's a website where people can enroll their consumer products. And here, with designing this, the primary goal for us was to limit user friction as much as possible. For example, we didn't want to burden the participant with inputting a bunch of information using the remote control of their smart TV. This is prevented using steps in the diagram here outlined below. So first of all, when a participant wants to register a device, they visit the CheckEngine website with any browser that they find most convenient. They fill in the details of the product and the embedded browser they want to test. And upon submission, they will receive a short URL. This URL is the only thing they have to input in, for example, their smart TV. And this will make the embedded browser visit our webpage. Now, this webpage will start dynamic evaluations. And after about 5 minutes, the evaluation will finish. Now, after this, the participant is invited to check if the product can be updated, and if so, to run the evaluation again. So what do we actually evaluate? Two main things. First of all, we want to check whether the security policies that are essential to browsers are enabled and implemented correctly in the embedded browser. For this, we used an artifact of prior research called Browser Audit, which essentially does this. We extended it, and we also made it compatible with CheckEngine. As a second part, we wanted to check whether the embedded browser is actually up to date. And for this, we rely on the user agent string. So this is a string that conveys the browser brand and the browser version. However, the product vendor can easily spoof this. So as an extra validation step, we developed a browser feature fingerprinting script to check if we can trust this string. So with check engine in place, the only thing for us left to do is to attract participants and to gain enrollments. We recruited people through distributing flyers at local industry and science events in Belgium, near Leuven, where our university is based, and also through an online LinkedIn post and a departmental-wide mail within the university. This led to 76 enrollments of 53 unique consumer products, which comprised over these products of 68 unique software versions. So, as for the results, I'll start with the good news. So in general, we found that most embedded browsers implemented all essential security policies and did so correctly and completely. We only found some bypasses or some functions that were not supported by these policy implementations, but in general, this was quite a positive result. The bad news, however, is that many of these embedded browsers were outdated and did not receive timely updates. Some of these browsers were over 3 years old. So we did a very broad analysis, but I think this is the most interesting part. We compared the date on which the product was released to the market, so when it hit the shelves, with the date that the embedded browser version was released. So we made the scatter plot, and in the most ideal world, all the data points should be on top of this graph, right? Meaning that there isn't much correlation and that all embedded browsers are up to date. Of course, we cannot really expect this because it's difficult for vendors to indefinitely keep supporting security updates. So this correlation is kind of expected, and in essence, maybe not that bad, but what makes it concerning is that when a product hits the shelf, the median browser age of the included version is 1.27 years. So this means that even at the point that the product hits the shelves, the browser that is embedded is most likely outdated. This is even a very optimistic representation. We do not take into account updates that participants might have installed after purchase and before the study. And on top of that, some of these vendors that ship outdated browsers advertise free security updates for several years, which apparently do not include the browser. And this is kind of misleading. So let's focus a bit more on this updating policy. In our data set, we got 13 products with multiple enrollments for different software versions. And this made us able to check what the actual updating policies of the browser is for each product vendor. This limited data suggests that embedded browsers are mostly only updated when a major software version if a major software version is installed on the product. So for example, if your product is patched, it is highly unlikely that also the embedded browser is patched due to this product patch. This can also give a false sense of security to users. For example, let's say you're a user that installs very diligently vendor updates, then you might perceive the browser as secure because you would think it's part of the overall software of the product. So in the interest of time, I'm not gonna go over this in much detail, but essentially we wanted to show that indeed obsolete browsers do lead to vulnerable browsers and thus can harm the user. This we did by several case studies. For example, we evaluated an e-ink tablet and reproduced known vulnerabilities on this. This was successful. So in that sense, indeed this has a bad effect on consumers. So based on these case studies and based on our broad analysis, we identified 3 causes for browser obsolescence. First of all, technical. We suspect that some of these vendors defer browser updates because it might break UI components in the product. For example, the browser engine is often used to render UI parts of a product. Then there's oversight. The vendor might simply not be aware of any outdated browser in their product. For example, we interacted with a vendor in our case studies where they were very proactive in fixing the issue after we reported it, so they weren't really aware of this. Then the most frustrating reason, I think, is neglect, where the vendor simply doesn't seem to care about security. This we also experienced in our case studies, where even after 6 months, the vendor does not show any intent to fix quite severe issues. So how can we take on these issues? Well, we think the technical issue is most easy to solve. We propose simply separating the user-facing browser from the browser engine used for UI components. This way it's much easier to frequently update the user-facing browser. Then for oversight and neglect, we think awareness and transparency are key. There's various ways to solve this, but we think a very interesting way to do this is by using product security labels, as was also researched in prior work. For example, for IoT labels, the embedded browser could also be part of this label. But we also fear that a lot of these vendors will not be easily incentivized, and as such, to solve the issue completely, we might need regulatory oversight. So allow me to finish this presentation with 3 key takeaways. We showed that while most browsers feature essential security policies, many remain unpatched for years, leaving users exposed to heightened risks. This is also amplified by the lack of transparency and also due to misleading information about security updates. And lastly, although we hope that vendors see this as a call to action, we suspect that external incentives are necessary. Thank you.